Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. November 16th, 2014. Sunday Night Football between the Indianapolis Colts and the New England Patriots. Most of you probably know how this one turns out. Yes, the Patriots destroyed the Colts 42-20 and will be a preview of that season's AFC Championship. But you remember this game for one thing, and one thing only. Jonas Gray going off. Out of nowhere, he scored 4 touchdowns. Keep in mind that Gray did not score a single touchdown before this game, and was a relatively unknown player. But he lit Indy up. And just as quickly as Gray came onto the scene, he disappeared. He only scored one more touchdown over the rest of his career. 80% of his career touchdowns came in this one game right here. Games like that where a player just plays lights out for one day and one day only are always fun to take a look at. But there's another game like that where the player emerged out of nowhere, played incredibly well, and scored 50% of his career touchdowns in the matter of one day. In a 1991 game between the Denver Broncos and San Diego Chargers, Broncos running back Gaston Green had a day to remember, and one that he would never come close to replicating again. And this is the story behind the most surprising 3-touchdown game in NFL history. Before I talk about the game and the performance, we need some context leading up to the event, because it will help us to understand why this game was so shocking to begin with. In 1988, the Los Angeles Rams were looking for a running back. They just traded Eric Dickerson away to the Indianapolis Colts the year before. While they had Charles White, who somehow led the league in rushing the year before, there was some skepticism about whether or not that was a fluke. White was going to be on the wrong side of 30 when 1988 rolled around, and the 1987 season seemed like a bizarre anomaly. White had 1,374 yards and 11 touchdowns in 1987. Prior to that season, since entering the league in 1980, he had 1,378 yards and 12 touchdowns combined. So it made sense that the Rams were in the market for a running back. And with that, they drafted Gaston Green in the first round of the 1988 NFL Draft. They were hoping that the UCLA man would be the future for the Rams at the position. However, he was not even close. In his 3 years with the Rams, he did next to nothing, with Greg Bell getting the majority of the carries. Green carried the ball 129 times for 451 yards and no touchdowns, averaging just 3.5 yards per carry. Green was hoping after not getting much of a chance in his rookie year that things would improve, but again, they never did. Head coach John Robinson criticized Green for not recognizing the competitive nature of the job and for being too inconsistent. And seeing how Robinson was there for those first 3 years, Green never really found a way to get out of the doghouse. He found the end zone just twice, once on a kickoff return against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and once in a receiving touchdown against the Cleveland Browns. Again, he scored 0 rushing touchdowns. Finally, after 3 miserable years where he was one of the biggest busts in the history of the franchise, Green was traded to the Denver Broncos in exchange for offensive tackle Gerald Perry. Green said about the trade, "I'm excited about getting an opportunity to play more in a new situation. I guess I was just caught up in a bad situation here." Little did he know just how much he was about to play. Why did the Broncos trade for Green? Well, they needed a backup running back. Sammy Winder, their 2-time Pro Bowl running back who had over 1,000 rushing yards during the 1984 season, was no longer playing. But in terms of who their starter was, and in terms of who the main man in that backfield was, that was not up for debate whatsoever. It was Bobby Humphrey. The first-round pick by the Broncos in the 1989 NFL Supplemental Draft had burst onto the scene. In his first 2 seasons, he crossed the 1,000-yard mark both times. He was coming off of a Pro Bowl campaign in 1990, where he had over 1,200 rushing yards. He scored the game-winning fourth-quarter touchdown in one game against the Chargers. Humphrey was a star. The only problem? He didn't feel like he was being paid like one. When he signed his contract, he was supposed to make $315,000 in his 3rd year, which was this 1991 season. The average player earned somewhere around $422,000 that year. Humphrey was making significantly less than that, and he was coming off of a Pro Bowl season. Denver didn't want to renegotiate the contract, so Humphrey decided that he wasn't going to play. He began a lengthy holdout that lasted into the regular season, meaning that Gaston Green was now going to be the team's starting running back. Through the first 3 games, Green was alright. It was an up-and-down start for him. On one hand, he had a game against the Cincinnati Bengals to kick things off, where he ran for a career-high 116 yards and helped the Broncos win it 45-14. On the other hand, you had him follow that up with an awful game against the Raiders where he had just 25 yards on less than 2.3 yards per carry, and a mediocre game against the Seahawks where he had 92 rushing yards on 25 carries. But most important for the context of our story, through the first 3 weeks, he had yet to find the end zone. Not a single rushing touchdown. That was all about to change in a rather unbelievable fashion. September 22nd, 1991. The Denver Broncos are taking on the San Diego Chargers in this AFC West rivalry. It's a big game for both teams. The Broncos are 2-1. If the Broncos win, they take sole possession of first place in their division at the quarter pole. The Chargers are 0-3. If the Chargers lose, then their season is pretty much over. At halftime, it was tied at 6 apiece, with Green having an awful game. He had 12 yards on 9 carries. He fumbled on his very first carry. He had a bad drop pass. Especially since trade talks with Humphrey and the 49ers fell through, you had to wonder if maybe the Broncos were reconsidering their position by this point. But in the second half, Green went on a tear unlike anything we'd ever seen before. After more than 3 seasons, the running back finally had his rushing touchdown, scoring from 5 yards out to give Denver their first lead of the game. In the fourth quarter, he added on to that with an unbelievable 63-yard touchdown run. And to seal the deal and make it a 2-possession game late, near the end of the fourth quarter, Green punched it in from 20 yards out. The Broncos won at 27-19. Green, who did not score a single rushing touchdown in his career before that point, had 3. After having just 12 rushing yards in the first half, he had 115 in the second half. Nobody saw it coming. And much like Jonas Gray, Green would never come close to doing this again. A few weeks after the game, Humphrey ended his holdout. Especially with the emergence of Green after this performance, he knew that he wasn't going to win the battle. However, Green held on to his starting spot, partly because he had the hot hand, and partly because Humphrey was out of shape. This was now Green's team and Green's backfield. How many rushing touchdowns would Green score for the rest of his career? 3. That's it. He had 1 against the Chiefs later in that 1991 season. Somehow, Green even made the Pro Bowl that year despite scoring a touchdown in just 2 games. He had a touchdown in a 1992 game against the Houston Oilers, and he scored the only touchdown of the 1992 game against the Seattle Seahawks, where the Broncos won 10-6. Green never played again after that 1992 campaign, and finished his career with just 6 rushing touchdowns. 50% of his total production came in that 1 game against the Chargers. The counter-argument that I'm sure a lot of you have as to this being the most surprising 3-touchdown game in NFL history by a halfback is what Browns running back Jerome Harrison did against the Chiefs in 2009, when he ran for 286 yards and 3 touchdowns. However, as great as that game was, there are 2 reasons why Green's performance was probably more surprising. Number 1, Harrison scored a rushing touchdown the year before, when he struck from 72 yards out in the fourth quarter against the Bills. Green never had a rushing touchdown before this game. And number 2, Harrison's rushing touchdown output against the Chiefs made up 42% of his total, and for Green, this game against the Chargers made up 50%. The statistics show that Green's performance against the Chargers was not just shocking, but it was historically shocking. Gaston Green's NFL career is somewhat of a bizarre one. Despite being a first-round pick, he never scored a rushing touchdown with the Los Angeles Rams. After more than 3 seasons, he finally finds the end zone, and when he does, he single-handedly wins his team the game and puts together an iconic 3-touchdown performance. And then he does nothing of note the rest of the way. When people talk about the greatest one-game wonders ever, Green's name should absolutely be in the conversation, because considering the circumstances, he probably had the most surprising 3-touchdown game in the history of the National Football League. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to win NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JarGator9 and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping with the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.